Welcome to this guided tour of a short passage from St. Chrysostom's second homily on St. Matthew's Gospel. In his first homily, Chrysostom introduced the Gospel and tried to prepare his hearers for engaging this book as an inspired text of Holy Scripture. And now in these opening sentences to his second homily, he reminds his readers of what he said in his first homily. For passages outside the New Testament, the Perseus website is especially helpful to help you with parsing and also give you access to the Little Scott and Jones lexicon. Montanari's lexicon is very helpful indeed as well. And if you want to find the passages for the Greek Fathers in either Greek or English, here are some websites that provide that, among others. If you want to try and work through the passage on your own before going through my notes, here's what we'll be looking at. So you can pause the video and study this passage, or else look it up in the website I gave. So here's our first sentence. Let's read it through. Ara memnesta tes parangelias, ein pro ein epoiesamata prosumas, parakaluntes metasiges hapases kai mystiques hesuchias equen ton legomenon hapanton. So as you see in the map, our sentence begins with its main clause, and that begins with ara. Now, ara is a particle that introduces a question. You see the question mark there at the end of the sentence. It's often untranslatable, but sometimes it'll be rendered as perhaps or is it that. This is one of those words that shares its letters with a couple of other words. It's only the accent that's different. So ara with an acute is a particle signaling either transition or inference, that is, consequence. And then ara is a noun, which can mean prayer or curse, which shows up one time in the New Testament quoting the Septuagint. These first two words show up quite a few times, so pay attention to those accents. This particle is followed by our verb, memnesta. You see the sta ending for the second plural, middle or passive. Reduplication on the front points us to the perfect. And our stem, mu nu eta, points us to memnesko. The use of the perfect tense form often overlaps with the present tense form, and here this perfect will translate in English as a present. So perhaps y'all remember. This verb follows the principal parts pattern 4, which adds sigma kappa or iota sigma kappa in the present tense. And you see the page, you can look it up in the book if you want to see a discussion of that. And here you see the principal parts. Notice that the iota is sometimes present, sometimes not in the present tense form. It usually is present, and it's usually subscripted, as you see. Notice also there's reduplication in the present tense form with that iota. That is present in several verbs that follow this pattern, though some of the verbs in the Hellenistic period have dropped the reduplication. So for example, if you look at ginosko in a lexicon like LSJ or Brill, then you're going to be redirected to gignosko, because originally it was gignosko, and then that became gnosko. So we have perhaps you remember. So the active of memnesko means to remind. Here we have the middle, to remember. So perhaps you remember. And this verb takes a genitive for its object, and so we have tes parangelias, which is simply a genitive singular from parangelia. You may remember that that means command or order or charge or instruction. Then we get a relative clause, hein, our relative pronoun, going back to parangelias, which proein. Proein's an adverb meaning recently. And then epoiesamatha. Here's our verb. You see the sigma alpha for the first aorist, the metha ending for a first plural, and it's from poieo. The only puzzling thing about this verb is that it's in the middle, so what's going on with that? A number of times poieo in the middle is used with a verbal noun as a periphrastic for the verbal idea itself. So for example, here's a passage from Luke 5. The disciples of John fast frequently and deeses poiuntai, do prayers or make prayers, which is simply a way of saying they pray. Notice that deeses is not a verb form in the future. It's actually from a third declension noun. Now, I've not been able to find a discussion of this construction in which a relative pronoun takes the place of an accusative noun, but that seems to be what's happening here, and none of the other uses of poieo in the middle seem to be appropriate. So this would be something like the charge which we recently charged you, or more smoothly, the charge we recently delivered to you. So you see prosumas is simply the to you, the prepositional phrase there. Next we have parakaluntes. participle, adverbial or circumstantial, modifying the epoiesamatha, which recently we charged you exhorting or encouraging or urging. You see the epsilon sigma ending for the nominative plural for the participle. Usually we'd have an omicron nu tau, but here the omicron has contracted with the epsilon of the stem ending to give us omicron upsilon. The meaning of this verb is kind of interesting because for most of us, I suppose, there's a different feel between exhorting somebody to do something and encouraging someone to do something. I think probably the place where you find those two combined simultaneously would be in an athletic coach, would be both exhorting and encouraging. So we have, which we recently made to you, encouraging, exhorting, urging. You understood, the direct objects left out. And the content of that urging or exhorting, encouraging is the infinitive that follows, akouein. But first we have a prepositional phrase, meta, that has two objects. Meta, with the genitive, means with, and siges is the genitive from sige, which means silence. And hapases, what's that? Well, it's another form related to pas upon, but with an alpha on the front. And it means pretty much the same thing. And here we have the genitive singular feminine, which is in agreement with siges. So meta siges hapases means with all silence. Kai mustikes Jesusias, another genitive noun modified by a genitive adjective. Mustikes is an easy adjective to remember since it's where we get our word mystical from. It's not used in the New Testament, but here's the information about it. And our second noun is hesukia, which means stillness or calm or tranquility. The hesychastic movement is a major tradition of prayer in the Eastern Orthodox Church. And there's a good introductory article on that in the Wikipedia. So our prepositional phrase says, with all silence and mystical stillness. Now grammatically, this prepositional phrase could modify the participle that precedes it, but it doesn't make much sense in this context anyway to say that you're urging or exhorting with all silence and mystical stillness. Rather, it makes a lot more sense that he's exhorting them to hear with all silence and mystical stillness. And what are they supposed to hear? Well, akouo can take the genitive, as we see here, and we've got a participle, legomenon, the men showing us we have a middle passive participle, and on, the genitive plural ending. Tone, the article going with it, shows our participle is going to function as either a noun or an adjective. Since there's no noun around for it to modify as an adjective, it is the noun. So the things being spoken. So to hear the things being spoken. And hapanton, that's another form of hapas. Again, following the same kind of forms as pas upon. So putting our first sentence together, we'd have something like, do you perhaps remember the charge which we recently delivered to you, exhorting you to listen with all silence and mystical stillness to all the things being said? We're now ready for our second sentence. It's not very complicated, so we don't need a map for it. Kai nun melomen ton hieron semeron epibainen prothuron. Dia kai tes parangelias anemnesa. And now, melomen, we are about. Melo means to be about to do something, and it takes an infinitive to let us know what it's doing. We need a complementary infinitive. And epibainen gives us our infinitive to go on or enter in. And now we are about to enter. Epibaino can take the genitive, and we have ton hieron prothuron. Hieron is from the adjective hieros, which means holy or sacred, and prothuron, combining pra and thura, means the front door, or it can mean a vestibule or an atrium. In other words, a hall or a room or a space between the outer door and the inside of the building. Since Chrysostom is using this to refer to the beginning part of Matthew's Gospel, which he considers to be a part of the whole building, we might say this is the entrance passage and not just a preparation for getting in the building, but the first part of the building. Then our final word in our first clause there is semeron, which is the adverb meaning today. So we have, and now we are about to enter today the holy entrance passages or vestibules. So the only thing to pay attention to here in this first clause is the word order, which doesn't flow as close to the English as Greek sometimes does. This is not unusual Greek order here, but you got to see what's being connected. We got the melomen, which is expecting an infinitive, and we get it a few words later, and then the adjective is separated from its noun. And that's why I encourage you to reread a passage several times once you've worked out the details of it, to try and begin to become familiar with picking up the signals as they come in the original order, instead of having to scramble them all and get them back into an English order. Well, our last clause then is dia, kai tes parangelias anemnesa. Dia is not dia, the preposition, but dia, the conjunction, meaning therefore, or for this reason. Therefore, or for this reason, indeed, kai here is not the connector, therefore, indeed, tes parangelias, the charge, anemnesa. Now we have aorist from anamnesco. And this follows the same principal parts pattern as memnesco does. This verb often has two accusatives with it, one for the person being reminded and the other for what they're being reminded about. So it would mean to remind somebody of something. But it also occurs as here with a genitive for that which someone's being reminded of. In this case, the accusative for the person being reminded is left out, and that often happens when an element can be supplied from the context, and indeed we've already seen that take place earlier in our passage after the participle. So our second sentence reads something like, "And now we are about to enter today the holy entrance passages. For this reason, indeed, I have reminded you of my charge," or the charge. This article, tes parangelias, the article could be the possessive, my charge, the one I just gave you. So this is how Chrysostom encourages his people to be prepared to read Holy Scripture, to have hearts that are still, receptive, open, focused, attentive. So let's read through our passage now, and you see I've put scanning marks in here so you can see the subunits within the different clauses. Aramemnesta tes parangelias hein proein epoiesamet proshumas, parakaluntes metasiges apases kai mystiques hesuchias acuein ton legamenon hapanton, kai nun melomenton hieron semaron embainein prothuron, dia kai tes parangelias anemnesa.